We all have those shows that we loved to watch as a kid, but many of those shows, without cult followings or massive corporations to keep the IPs alive years after the show's end, they end up relegated to the very back of your mind, just barely prickling at your subconscious to remind you of their existence, so forgotten by nearly everyone that you're left to wonder if the show ever really existed, or if you just imagine the whole thing as a kind of fever dream. But in the age of information, where the sum of human knowledge is literally at your fingertips, many can take to online forums or message boards seeking out others who remember those long-forgotten shows. What if you remembered a show lost to the sands of time, but discovered far more than you ever wanted to know, and opened up a can of worms that you weren't prepared for? Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. Yeah, well, see, that was supposed to be a campfire, but someone forgot to buy the fire pit. It was me. I forgot to buy the fire pit. Anyway, just pretend it's a crackling campfire. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, this is the tale of Candle Cove. Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. Usually I have two modes for Halloween. Either I dedicate the entire month to it, which, thinking back, I think I've only ever done once, or I do one or two special videos closer to the day proper. This year I'm combining those methods together to create what I'm dubbing Creepypasta Double Feature. Over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to cover creepypasta stories that I've chosen above the rest, and bookend the month with 2 editions of BlackScarabFilmZ Presents. You've already seen the preceding one, and on Halloween we'll have another one. But some of you out there might have a very valid question. What the hell is a creepypasta? In which case, hello old person who's new to the internet and or child who probably really shouldn't be watching my videos. In short, for the uninitiated, it's basically short horror stories created for the internet, usually posted on message boards and the like, or people's blogs. You might even know one of the most well-known creepypastas, Slender Man, because of unfortunate real-life events that is inspired. However, as I've made clear in the past, I'm not that big on horror, so the ones I've chosen are far tamer than famous ones like Lavender Town Syndrome, or Jeff the Killer, Squidward Suicide, or Ben Drowned. And we start our double feature with my absolute favorite creepypasta, Candle Cove. Candle Cove is my favorite for multiple reasons, not the least of which is the fact that it centers around a piece of lost media, which is something that's always fascinated me ever since I was a kid. And if it's something that's fascinated you, you'd probably like Candle Cove, even despite the creepier elements. Unlike most other creepypastas, which are just posted online, Candle Cove actually has a cover to look at, since it was collected by the author Chris Straub into a collection of similarly unsettling works, which is really convenient for me. If the author's name sounds vaguely familiar, perhaps you're familiar with Straub's popular webcomic Chainsaw Suit, or Brood Hollow, or Starslip. The guy's got a bunch of webcomics. I actually found out that he was the author accidentally when I was browsing the Chainsaw Suit site years ago, and I was very impressed to discover that it was the same guy, because I like both Candle Cove and Chainsaw Suit. Anyway, the cover is designed to look like old TV static, like when you're watching an old VHS tape or getting a bad connection on an old CRT, with the text Candle Cove and Other Stories, with some reviews on the back cover. Usually, I don't like that, but since this is a collection of short stories, you can't very well put a single blurb on the back, so I'll let it slide. Let's get to the story itself. So this isn't told in a narrative way like many other stories in the genre. This is told in the form of a fake online message board, which in the context of the story makes sense. Basically, the story revolves around the users of the Net Nostalgia Forum, where a user by the name of SkyShale033 asks if anyone remembers a weird local kids show called Candle Cove that aired in the early 70s at 4 in the afternoon. They're asking because they can't find any information regarding it online. Though, in this day and age, that's not necessarily a bad thing. At least they won't have to find out that one of the actors was secretly a monster. The first response is from a user named Mike_Painter65, who vaguely remembers it having something to do with pirates and marionettes, which honestly makes sense for a kids show. Puppets can be creepy, but pirates are cool, so it balances. Now, if this show had clowns, that would be a bad combo. Skyshell responds with more remembered information, the Pirate Percy, being made out of parts of several other dolls that didn't quite fit together, the head being an antique porcelain baby doll's head, which was very scary to Skyshale as a kid, and absolute hell for any fan trying to make proper replicas. Those antique baby doll heads are hard to track down. Another user by the name of Jaren_2005 resurrects the thread with more specific information, saying that they're sure that the show aired for a short time on Channel 58 in 1971, and had memories of watching it with their brother after the news. They recall the show's premise being about a little girl with a J name, possibly Janice, imagining herself hanging out with pirates on the ship Laughingstock, and that Pirate Percy got scared very easily and wasn't a very good pirate. Skyshell jumps back in to thank Jaren and mentions how they just remembered that the ship itself could talk, and that it had a voice reminiscent of actor Ed Wynn.
Well, even if you don't believe it, just help her spread that around, will you?
They also remember that when it talked, the model switched from a wooden ship to a fake-looking foam puppet that was very jarring. Just like whenever Power Rangers switched from the Sentai footage to the American footage, and the Dragon Shield was suddenly a crappy cloth version. Mike Painter returns with a new memory, a quote from the show. "You have to go inside." Which Skyshell remembers as what the ship would say to Percy when he was too afraid to enter a cave or a dark room to get treasure. Skyshell also asks about the villain, a puppet with tall teeth and a handlebar mustache. Other commenters, because this is the internet, correct Skyshell to say that Horace Horrible was the sidekick to the real villain, whose name was the Skin Taker. Named so because anytime you go out to TGI Fridays with him, he eats all the potato skins off the appetizer sampler, which goes against all restaurant etiquette. Everybody gets one, and any leftover are doled out according to dibs. The commenters discussed the strangeness of the character, who was a dirty skeleton with a top hat, cape, and large eyes. The top hat and cape being sewn crazily, apparently meant to be the skin of children that he had taken. As the commenters regain their memories, they start to realize how royally messed up the show actually was, and one remembers a nightmare that they had of an episode that was just the characters screaming and moaning for the entire runtime. But several of the other commenters remember seeing that episode vividly, and remember being freaked out as well. The final twist comes from Mike Painter, who says that he visited his mother recently and asked if she remembered the show, and she remarked that she was surprised that he remembered it. After all, he used to tune the TV to static and sit for a half hour watching dead air, imagining Candle Cove. So there's no characters or action to talk about, at least not in the way I usually do, so I'm just going to boil down my thoughts into this section. I stay away from the really scary ones because while I'm not prone to nightmares, I am prone to being freaked out and unsettled. But I'm weird, because what freaked me out in The Exorcist wasn't the horrifying body horror or vomit or self-abuse with a crucifix. No, it was the vivid description of Reagan getting a spinal tap. So this story hits a very specific and very unsettling chord with me, because we all have those shows we remember that no one else does, especially when as a kid you might have seen it while up late with the stomach virus or when you were home from school. And especially before on-screen guides to tell you what was on, it might occupy that strange space in your head. I know that I've had a few moments of feeling that I've genuinely invented something in my head because I saw it late at night and through the exhaustion. I have vague recollections, but nothing I've seen of it matches what I remember. And this takes the normal expectations and turns them darker, without actually portraying any real violence in it. No one is killed, there's no scary image at the end, no jump scare, just a very unsettling scenario. And it works, because while I'm desensitized to the story now, years and years after first reading it, and having read it several times since, but that first time, it freaked me the hell out. More than Slender Man or Jeff the Killer could ever hope to. Especially imagining my own images of what the show was like, which this story is rife with. Great visual language that makes constructing it in your head really easy. And while I haven't watched the entirety of the Channel Zero adaptation of the story, I will say based on the pictures, they're weak, man. They ain't got nothing on my brain. That Tooth Demon is freaky, though. Way scarier than Tim Shaw was. And the final twist is just the best way it could end. Because it hits on that familiarity, because the only thing scarier than realizing that something you vividly remember never happened is finding out that several people remember something that never happened. Candle Cove is one of the best crafted creepypastas out there. Chris Straub is not only a comedic genius, as his classic Two Cops comics suggest, but a visionary of suspenseful horror stories. The premise of it centering around a piece of lost media is genius, and it's why the story has stuck with me over the years. It's just that good. And it's great for people who don't like gore or gratuitous violence, since apart from being scary, it's fairly family-friendly compared to other creepypastas. I don't usually talk about the reviews on the back of the book, but there's one from the AV Club that I want to read out loud. One of the most influential and oft-imitated examples of the internet horror genre, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I highly recommend Candle Cove to anyone looking to start their Halloween season off right. Next episode, we step it up a notch in the level of scary as the Creepypasta Double Feature comes to a close. See you next time. I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society closed. So I don't usually do this, but I figured I'd put something fun at the end of the credits for you guys. This is me recording the Creepypasta Double Feature intro song. Let's do it. Creepypasta Double Feature. Ooh, I like that one.